So welcome, Tess, to the first, automate all the things live chat. We're going to kind of be working through a problem that you came to me through the MakerPad group.
Yeah.
I think, how I'd love to start this out is just tell me a little bit about yourself, what you're trying to do. And then we'll jump into, your actual flow. And then we'll pass it back to me around how can we automate this and how can we make it work. And we're essentially going to be working with the Airtable API. So with that, off to you and tell me a little bit about yourself.
For sure. Sounds good. So I am a fitness instructor and tinkerer of sorts. And so those two things have essentially combined in the last couple months to lead me to try and figure out how we can essentially use no-code tools to work with the back end of the studio that I work with right now to essentially streamline a few things that take a lot of human hours to figure out at the moment. So the two things I kind of came to you with were members that attend for the day. So like just a daily attendance.
Mm-hmm.
Who was in the studio today, just to keep track of that and see who popped in. And then member milestones. So it's always great to celebrate people when they hit these milestones, 100 classes, 200 classes, 300 classes, stuff like that. And the thing about it is we can run that report from the back end, but what the accessing the API has allowed me to do was essentially export that information to Airtable, and then hopefully more so keep track of a live kind of database.
Yeah.
When we give out those milestone like t-shirts and things like that, it's always this like crazy like 3-day rush of getting the report and like who got what when and like all that kind of stuff. So essentially just trying to like streamline a couple things and using these back-end systems to do that.
That's awesome. Like so you don't actually come from kind of a coding background, or you just kind of saw a problem and thought, I could solve it with the tool. So far we've got the API. Did you ever work with an API before, or was that kind of the first time you were touching it?
This is the first time. So finding Parabola like in the last 5 or 6 weeks has been amazing. I've done some coding in the past, just actually more recently. So this past summer I took like a iOS boot camp and coded my first iOS like mobile app kind of thing. And I've just been tinkering with other kind of no code tools over the years, like website, like Squarespace, Knack for databases, things like that, just to build kind of side projects. So I've been in the realm for a little bit, but I've definitely never worked with an API. Worked with Airtable a little bit, but just as like more what it's like a traditional sense, like as almost like an elevated spreadsheet. But
right.
Yeah.
Elevated spreadsheet. I like that. I'm going to steal that from you.
Do it. Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, really cool. Like I know I peeked at your Parabola account, and I think it's cool to see someone with more flows than myself. It's really exciting. It's even cooler that like you come, you actually, work with something that's real, and you're using these kinds of no code tools to make that simpler. And that, I think for me is the most exciting part in what we do, like, is that ability to take, someone who has some tech experience, but mainly who has a problem, and then just being like, I can solve it myself, and it just makes my life easier. Now, I know there's like a huge gap that we're going to actually like jump into, which is I have a problem, I want to solve it, and how do I actually do it? And I think
for sure,
when we're going to look at your flow, it's not that simple. So with that, like, I'd love to kind of go and if you could share your screen and jump into what we're trying to automate here. And then I'll talk a little bit about, the tips or the actual automation and how to, get that last step. So.
Right. Okay. So let me just hop in. I'll share one of the big flows. It kind of looks like maybe a Frankenflow.
Yeah, I think, I don't want to scare people here, but I think, if you talk us through the steps, it's not,
for sure,
it's not that complicated.
It's not so crazy. Yeah. So essentially what's using the API. So I'm actually working with Mindbody. So Mindbody is a big backend system for a lot of different fitness studios, yoga, dance, spin, they do a gamut of things. And so a lot of studios use that backend. So that's the API pull that I'm using to essentially, this is the member milestone. So it's like getting all of our clients and then just running through their visits by quarter. That's why there's so many of those. Just so that we didn't max out the flow by pulling all the visits over the last couple of years. So it's just broken up into quarters, and then we just get into a little bit of formatting just so it's more legible, and sorting. So this row here is essentially just taking those members and putting them through into their buckets of if they're in the 100 club or 200 club or 700 club, which is pretty amazing. Anyone that's done 700 fitness classes in the last couple of years, it's pretty impressive. And then it essentially spits it out. I do have them going to just a Google sheet right now. That's how I started. And so now though, the API export's also going to Airtable.
Right.
And so I can just poke up here.
Yeah, there we go.
I think this is, let's see if it'll load up here. Yeah, so it's just a sample of what it essentially looks like, except it's a couple, maybe about 100 names longer. But it essentially gives the milestone club, first name, last name, total classes, and whether or not they've received their t-shirt.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of the flow is formatting just to get to these like four columns and make it pretty. But the problem is that, so for instance, if this is all populated with 100 names, people in different milestone clubs, if I run it again, I'd like to keep that info in the shirt received column to know that they've received their thing, but their total classes will still update, as they attend more classes. And then also new members or people that hit those total class milestones will also be added to the list. So so that's the gist.
So maybe if you can go back to the flow, I just want to maybe for people who are less familiar with Parabola and talking a little bit about what this does. So essentially, if we talk about this flow, what it does initially is import data from an API. It makes that simple and it turns it into a table. Now we won't click into it because there's a lot of personal data, but I will be on my side when I'm sharing my screen, showing an example. And then it essentially does a lot of steps that, most people aren't necessarily going to do, but it just goes and looks at visits on each quarter, summarizes them, groups them, then does some formatting, and then says, okay, well, if you have X, visits, you should have this prize, and it maps those out, creates groups, as you're doing, and then just exports it back to Airtable. So exactly what we want to do in this is, okay, on that export step, how do we do two things? Update the right column, which is the number of visits. And then second, I'll talk a little bit about how you would update the right category based on what you want to do. And then we'll jump into a few examples. And the second part, which, I'll show you how to do it, but we haven't talked about, is deleting rows. Yeah. So that was the second thing you came to me with, saying in the daily schedule, whatever that schedule is, I don't think we need to kind of jump into the Airtable. Yeah. It's just saying, hey, I have got all these rows. I want to delete all of those Airtable rows because that was yesterday. So I'll be showing both of those. So great intro. This is super, super cool. And I just want to, it seems complicated, but once you get that first thought row or that first flow, you just say okay, I've got 12 of these, right?
Yeah, it's not actually so crazy. I mean, it's been great working with Parabola because there's a lot of duplicates in this example, but essentially once people dive into it, it gets pretty clear as to, what you're doing, and then you can duplicate those steps if you need to.
Awesome. So if you could pass it back to me, I'm going to share my screen here. There we go. Quick share. I'm going to share my desktop here. You should be seeing two Parabola flows here. Can you see my screen all good? Okay, awesome. So my flow is much simpler. It's just a couple
Nice.
steps.
It's beautiful.
So let's
Yeah.
start with updating the Airtable
Sure.
records. And the Airtable records I want to update is, a copy of what you have.
Right.
Right. So we have club, first name, last name, total classes, shirt received. Now these don't map properly, but don't worry about it.
Gotcha. Okay.
So instead of an API import, I've got an Airtable import. I just import the same base. And just so I have some data, essentially the thought process will be the same. So I just import my table.
Got it.
And then I'm gonna put this back into draft. So I import the table just so I have some data to work with. And ultimately, whatever you're doing, you can always import the Airtable and then join to your list, which you already do.
Right.
And then I just increase the number of classes by 10. So there's a change, right? So I take the total classes, I create a new column that's called total classes updated, and I just add 10 to it.
Gotcha.
Right. So the output is total classes plus 10. And this is what we want to send back to Airtable, just as a test again. So we have the data.
Gotcha.
Makes sense so far?
I think so. I'm thinking, I guess right now, my equivalent of your first step, the Airtable import, is
your API import.
API import.
Yeah. So
before it's getting exported out.
So you're going to have a join eventually. I'm just going to kind of talk about this.
Sure.
You're going to have your Airtable import, and then you're going to have that whole flow that you currently have, which is going to be that whole, 3-step. And then at the join, you're going to do your Airtable table.
Right.
So this, and, for the prizes in this table, you should have some kind of key. So what I mean by that is whether it's first name, last name, like you remember when you sent the daily schedule, there was a client ID.
Oh, right. Okay.
I'm sure that the API returns a client ID. So you should have client ID in your milestone club as well.
Gotcha.
And then when you join them, you're going to join them by the client ID from the API and the client ID from the Airtable import. Okay. And then you're going to have that one table in Parabola. And it's going to be important that you have it because your new classes, your updated classes comes from the API. And where you want to send it goes to Airtable.
Right.
You need to have that Airtable data so you have the ID of the record you want to update. So
to
I'll
match,
in the export step.
Gotcha.
But right now for me, I'm just importing the Airtable data, but you will have to join to create a table in Parabola for both.
Right. I'll have to join it to the exported data that I already have. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. I know it's going to sound like really weird for like people coming in. They're like, there's a table in Parabola.
I know. I'm just thinking of like, how to clarify it. But essentially when you join it, it's going to give you a table that you can then connect to, like how you have your math table in the middle. It's going to give you an intermediary step that you can then,
there's only two variables that you kind of need. You need the client ID, the record ID, and the number of classes. Okay. You need one table with all three of those because those are the three variables that we're going to have to put into the API. So I think that's a good intro into the API.
Gotcha.
So I'm going to delete this. So whoops. Okay. Delete. So before I kind of jump into the step, I want to kind of talk about the documentation of Airtable. So Airtable works like a table. So you can use the API on a specific table for a specific record in that table. And the one we're going to be working with for now is the prizes table. Right. We just, we want to update the number of total classes. And what we want to do is update records. Right. So, very simple. It's a patch call. So that means that we're going to update. Patch means you go and fetch the record and we're going to update one specific field. And we are going to do it at the record level. So this one, the two differences between that is that we can specify multiple records at once.
Right.
In Parabola, tables are hard to work with in the body that we're sending. So we'd rather not loop like in that body that we're going to send. We'd rather just send one record at a time because that's how Airtable that's how Parabola thinks. it's going to run the API call for each record, each row in a table in Parabola. So we want to do it for one record at a time. So we're specifying in the API call what record we want to update. So just kind of talking through this, like it seems very complicated. It's super, super simple. This is saying that we're updating a record. This is telling Parabola like which record in my millions and millions of records at Airtable do we want to update. Then it says, okay, well, once we get into your table, which record do you want to update? And then here it just says, well, okay, in that record, which fields do you want to update?
Right.
Those are the three things that we need to tell Airtable. So thinking of like this and mapping it to Parabola, I'm going to do that now. So API export. So type of call, that's the first. It's a patch call.
Right.
And then I literally took this, I copy pasted everything until the record. Right. So this is specifying I want to call Airtable. This is specifying I want to call my Airtable base. This is the table, and this is the record. So everything here is static. The only thing that's going to change is this record that we want to update for each call. So kind of thinking of Parabola and how it works, and maybe I'm repeating for you, but Airtable, Parabola, too many tools here. Parabola is going to run this API call for each row in this table.
Yeah.
So here we have everything that's static, and then we're specifying for the record the ID of that Airtable record we want to update. So this is a variable. In Parabola, it's like little brackets.
Yep.
Make sense?
Yep. Nope, that makes sense. And the ID is coming from that's the Airtable ID that came in.
Exactly. And that's why you have to join those two tables together.
Gotcha. Because you need that. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. So in one call, you need to be able to say, for this record, for this client, or that's going to be the record ID, update the number of classes. And so then really, once you've done that, it's really, really simple. What I do is you copy paste this little JSON.
Yep.
And this actually uses the fields in your table. So this is dynamic. The documentation is dynamic based on your table.
Yeah.
And in total classes, that's the variable we're updating. You put the variable of your new updated number.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does. It would be, I'm just trying to think of what it would be that column, but from this join table.
Exactly.
But essentially the data from that column is actually coming from the not from the Airtable call, but from the API.
Yeah. So the total classes updated, if we look at it, comes from this interim step.
Yeah.
That would be yours would be after the join of the Airtable to your new kind of table that's in Parabola with the new data from the API and the updated step.
Right.
So I'm actually going to just refresh this because I think I have old data here. So this tells me 410, 254. So now it should be 420, 264, 320. And then now I'm going to talk, actually let's run this and then I'll talk about how you could update the milestone.
Okay.
So I'm going to have to publish this and then I'm going to run it now. So what we're hoping in this, go ahead.
Sorry, it's nice to see a flow that runs in
like 3
seconds.
Mine are simple. And this is I make it so that I don't look stupid on the live stream, right?
No,
I
try to make it work. It's great.
Tell me about it. So now we have the updated numbers.
Yep, perfect.
So it ran for each record. It went to get total classes. It updated that number. So that's what we want.
Right.
Now, if we're talking about, and I'll quickly touch on this, like how would you update this right here? So the shirt received. So this is actually going to be a little bit of a challenge because if you're updating, so you can see it's a table, right? So it's an array. So you're going to have to input the prizes they already have, or what I would recommend is have a column that is their new achievement.
Okay.
So it's a column that only has things you need to action on.
Gotcha.
right?
Okay.
So when you run the flow, you're going to say, okay, this person just got to the 400 club, which I think is like that long step where you're putting people into the right categories.
Yes. Yep.
So you want to create a new column, and then you can create a view in Airtable that is like people I need to send stuff to.
Okay.
Right?
It's like what the thing is. Yeah. That's
if
the
it's
problem
empty, you know you don't have to send something. If it's full, you know you'll have to send something.
Yeah.
So that's how I would just like MVP, I would do it.
Okay.
And then next step, if you want to do it, is like, well, could we just automatically send them stuff?
Right.
So once they hit a milestone, could you just send them an email saying, hey, you know, we've generated a coupon where you can go and get your shirt. Something like that.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah, I wouldn't do the table.
Okay.
Just because it's going to get finicky. I would just create a new column that is new. And then it would work exactly like this.
Okay.
Make sense?
So it'll be like milestone achieved.
Exactly.
Kind of column, and
it'd be
I guess
empty if it's nothing.
So by empty if it's nothing, do you mean like essentially everyone that's in a bucket right now, that's nothing? So it has to track a change.
Right.
It has to track if they move into a different one.
When you think about it, like if you're in a bucket and you're not going to a new bucket, I don't really care about updating your number of classes. I could for fun, like that could be one step.
Yeah.
Right. But then what I would do is I would just remove everyone who's not in a new bucket and then update that field as well. So there might be 2 API exports here.
Right.
Because it's great to track the number of classes. That's interesting for like, but if the goal is to like, I need to send you a prize. Yeah. You know, you could remove everyone who hasn't that trigger.
Right.
So that's how I would kind of think about it.
Yeah. I think we'd have to do both in the sense that people just like to know how many they've done. I think in this way as well. It's just, you know, fun and motivational and in the kind of the fitness world. But no, that makes sense in terms of the actioning. Like that's actually a separate thing, right?
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
It can even like it could be in the same flow because you already have that data, and then you just say, "Hey, this person has achieved a new one," and then you API export that.
Right.
Cool.
That makes sense.
Okay, delete. So this one's pretty simple. I've got the daily schedule, and I'm just creating I'm going to copy paste this because I was testing before. So let's imagine I have there are some fields I want to delete and some fields I want to keep. In your case, it's going to be all of them. But it's just to actually have like, there we go. Some data that changes. So I have a few steps that's not just like import, delete, you know?
And then it's gone. Yeah, for sure. Okay.
So yeah, very simple. I'm going to put this back into draft. Import, I filter what is to delete, right? So let me just refresh this. I import the table. Mm-hmm. I filter on the records that I want to delete. And then, you know, the important part is running the API call. So let's go back into I think it's daily schedule and delete records.
Right. Okay.
Now, very similar. It's a type delete.
Right.
Self-explanatory. Okay. Then we've got the API call. Similarly, API, your information, which table and which record. Mm-hmm. So if I come here, nope, I can close this one actually. Come here. I've got delete. Right. And then I've got everything here up until like that.
Yeah.
And oops. So far we're good. Then we've got this little record ID, mm-hmm. which is telling us what do we want to delete.
Gotcha.
And then there should be.
So it said records.
And pretty much that's it.
Okay.
Right. So you just say which record you want to delete.
Right.
I actually did this a little differently with like a URL in code. So I'm actually going to change this. Okay. Let's just do it on the fly, see if it works. So here, I just want to do ID, which is the variable here. So let me make sure that that is correct. So show a simple example. We're just telling it which record to delete. You specify your ID and that's it. That's I'm going to remove this encode URLs. Okay. So there was a way where you can pass a table, and I did that, but that's not what I recommend now that I'm realizing that was a mistake.
That's right. I was like, I have no idea what that side of Parabola does. So
yeah, honestly, it was just a way of passing a table within the call. Don't worry about it. I thought this sounds like, good. That's what you should do, but now I'm realizing that's what you should do. You should just specify in the call what the ID is.
Yeah, because in this example, you've already filtered that you want those deleted. So essentially, even if this had 30 rows, it would essentially delete them all.
Yeah, and honestly, in your case, if you want to delete all of them, you would still do the exact same thing. Yeah. Right? Because it's going to run the API call for every single row that's in this table. Yeah. So when you get to it's a good point. When you get to the API export, you need to have every record you want to delete in that table within Parabola. Right. So in your case, it's just going to be import, delete. Yeah. But if someone else, like, you can't specify, don't run it on, on these like records. You have to do that as a step within Parabola before. Gotcha. So, let's try this out. Let's publish. I'm a little stressed that this won't work.
I think you're going to be okay. It looked okay to me.
Out if it doesn't.
Nah, you're good.
I'm good.
Yeah. I think so. Right, yeah. I feel like those red hashes show up a lot quicker than the green ones.
And it deleted the ones that are delete.
Perfect. Perfect.
So there we go.
Okay. Awesome. I think I understand too, like it, in this instance, or in the instance of that daily attendance, those are actually going to have to be two separate flows so that it doesn't do the attendance and then delete the attendance.
That should be fine.
Right?
That should, because you could delete the attendance. I mean,
you'd want to see it through the day. Right. So in my brain, I'm thinking, okay, we'll pull who's coming in today at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
And then at 11 p.m. we'll delete.
Right. That's what I would recommend. Yeah. Right. That's where I was going. Yeah. So it doesn't like make it two flows. You don't have to do it simultaneously. And do them. I would actually recommend doing them like one after the other.
Right.
Right. Like midnight and then midnight 2, get the attendance for the next day.
Gotcha.
That way, if someone signs up between those two kind of minutes, maybe, I'm not sure.
Right. Yeah.
There might be some edge cases there. So don't put too much time between those two.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
But yeah, so two flows, relatively easy. Take everything, delete it, and then get that kind of flow of the new attendees.
Right. Okay. Perfect. And then, a little bit different to that. The member milestones. That's all. All in one flow. Yeah, because that's essentially updating all.
You could create two flows where. Yeah. Sorry, two flows. One where it just updates the number of classes, and then the other flow where it checks whether the last time you ran.
Yep.
And checks for that change. And don't forget that, like, just for simplicity's sake, Parabola has a functionality where at a certain point you could run another flow.
Right.
So you could create a flow.
I see what you're saying.
That is check members' new milestones.
Yeah.
And so when that updated count finishes, you go and say, run this other flow.
Right. Okay. Interesting. I haven't gotten that.
Same thing with the delete, actually.
Okay.
Once you're done deleting, your next flow might be get today's schedule.
Right.
Go and trigger that one.
And trigger get today's schedule. Yeah.
That way it's like simultaneous, but you know that it's not. It's linear in that when one finishes, the other starts.
Gotcha.
So it's one after the other, but they're not. You don't have to create two flows.
Right.
And that might save some costs as well.
Yeah, it could. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I haven't actually used any triggers yet, so yeah, that could be a thing.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining for this first live chat, I guess.
Yeah,
automate
no
all the things.
problem. Yeah.
Tess, I'm really impressed. I was actually super impressed by what you built. So I'm happy
Thanks.
you're taking the time to share it. So
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, if I can help anybody else, happy to as well, just because everything seems a little bit foreign at the beginning, but once you start digging into it, I think you uncover, for example, like new problems, but at the same time, I think even in different use cases, you'll find similarities. So
yeah, I personally think you're a pro. I don't think this is foreign to you.
Oh, yeah, I don't know about
I think
that.
you're probably like out of a lot of, there's not that many Parabola users, but I'm definitely thinking like not that many have that complex flows, and it was really cool the way you used it. So you're a pro. I'm putting you in the pro category.
I get to be in the pro bucket. I get the t-shirt.
Exactly.
Milestone.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking the time, and we'll chat soon.
All right, sounds good.
All right.
Thanks, man.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye.